Okay guys, I'm going to do a follow-up video on refines and we're going to get down to some a little bit more advanced things. This will be a little bit more heavier and it's, like I said, going to be more advanced. And it's going to be based around refining your gear and what's most important. I want to talk also a little bit more about base refines versus the percentage refines. So the whole numbers versus the percentage. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about just the overall strategy with each general of where you want to focus to get the most efficiency. Because refines are very important. The reason that I wanted to do this is what spurred this on is I do see a lot of lower refines. When people lock in a refine, they'll get on an Aries piece, they'll get a 15% refine or a 10% or a 12% refine. And then they'll lock it in and then they'll start spending gems. This is the biggest thing that I want to talk about first, so I'm going to focus a bit of time on it right now. You can see here that I've focused on my Aries bow. Our range attack is very, very important, so I'm going to spend and focus most of my gems on that because this is where I can really get some benefit out of having a strong archer attack. I can get lots of points because archers generally don't get touched when they're getting attacked, and when they do get touched, they die. So what happens is they do all of their damage before they're touched. Eventually, you are going to spend some time getting a little bit more HP built up on them, but really, we want to just get that attack really high because that's what's going to get you the most value out of your attack. You'll see that I've actually got a max refine here, and the last time I did a video, I had a 15% refine. But you can see I got rid of the 15% refine and I upgraded it to a 22.5. Why did I do that? Why didn't I lock the 15%? The reason I did that is because when I lock that 15%, I'm now paying 6,000 gems plus the refining stones every single time, and the gold every single time I do a refine. And I have only one slot to get a ranged troop attack. If I'm doing it from before, like with two slots, I now have 2 slots. That doubles my chances of getting a high quality ranged troop attack. And it's a pretty low percentage chance that you even get ranged troop attack, but if you do enough refines, eventually you get one. And then what I like to do is set a threshold of where I want to be. For myself, I want to be 20% or higher. Some people will, that coin a lot, will say, I want basically 23% and up, and that's what I'll lock. And some of you will decide, hey, I don't want to spend that many gems on this, so if I get a 15%, that's fine. But what you'll see is that I did get a 22.5. Let's look at this in another case of how many gems I could have spent. I could have just kept the 15% and then come along, say I got an 8% refine. That would have been lucky to get because I still only have one slot to get it. But if I got an 8% attack refine like I got on March speed, well, then I would have had 15 plus 8. I'm basically in the same spot now of the same amount of buffs. I have a 22.5. Now I can every once in a while throw 6k gems into a refine to see if I get another ranged troop attack, and then I complete this bow. You'll also notice here that I have, I'll do it this way. I have a base at the top here, and then I also have the percentages. I prefer the percentages on attack. They're up to 25%. And if you look here, I have a 629. That's almost a max level whole refine. The problem is the whole refine at 634. 634 on a tier 13 troop is 18%. That's why I'll keep that. That's pretty close to 20%. That's not bad. And then as you go down through the tiers, it gets better and better. That percentage gets higher. So that's why, again, they're better on defense because a lot of your defense is going to be more of your smaller troops. But on your offense, you're going to be, in the end game, tier 13, tier 14, and tier 12 troops. So although those don't get debuffed, these base refines, the problem is that they're already debuffed. They're actually pretty significantly debuffed. So unless you're running against somebody that has really, really high debuffs, like a big coiner that has massive and has all their ACA gear filled out on all of their sub-generals, then chances are you're not going to run into a keep that's going to debuff your 25% refine enough to matter for that. But since this is a really full refine, I kept that one. And maybe down the road, I'll try to refine that one out. But I thought that was a really key thing to talk about, was to recognize that you're going to get more value when you only lock in the high ones. Because if you lock something in, you're reducing the slots that you have a chance at getting a higher refine. So you're really reducing the amount of chances you get, and you're increasing your cost. When we don't think about the fact that, a 12% and a 12% equals a 24%. So if you just keep refining and give yourself a better chance to get a 24, you've already got the same benefit at less cost. And then you have another spot to fill in. Now, at that point, you also want to think, when you're creating your thresholds, that you're trying to reach for a level of percentages. The top players are all at 1,000% and more for their attack values, whether it's Cav or Archer or Siege. You want to try to get it up to that 1,000, and some are actually cracking up to around 1,200%. Well, where you get that is partially it comes from your refines. So if we look at the refines, you get your bow, and then you have your ring. This isn't an Akka ring, or this isn't the Akka ring. It's not the Ari's ring. It's just this. So we only get 20% here. That's why I'm not going to spend too much time. You can see I've done some refines here, and I got some nice ones. But I don't want to spend too much time until I can get the Akka ring on there and get the 25% refines. But if you look at the two pieces there, I have two pieces that cover attack. That means from my refining, I can get 4 times 25 times 2. That means I can get a maximum of 200% from the refines. And then the rest of the attack percentage will come from the gear, will come from the dragon, will come from your buffs in your specialties, and will come from here. And then again, like we said, will come from your troop attack from your cultivation stats. So when you're talking about the different troop types, let's take a second and talk about that. As I said, Archer's pretty easy, because when we're in the middle game and we're trying to build our archers, we can really just do the attack, and we don't have to spend a silly amount of money on that, because we can still spread out the other generals. And you want to remember that it is nice to have a mixture of generals, so you can send different troop types against different types of bases. But you can also see how expensive it is to build a general, so you're going to have to decide for yourself how much time or money that you want to invest in this game versus, how much you want to diversify in the game. It's a very, very elaborate game in that sense. For most people who are going to spend a moderate to very little or no amount of money, you really want to stay focused to one powerhouse, because you're never going to really compete at that high level where people spend literally millions of dollars. When you're talking about your Cav general, you want to focus mostly, again, on attack. So here's my Cav general. And remember, you can move the gear around to different generals. I've focused on attack here. Now, here's the thing. I've got some refines here that are base refines. That was working pretty nice when I was tier 11 and tier 12 troops. But now that I'm moving into tier 13, now those percents are going to start to go down. In fact, that 906 there works out to a 15%. And the 670 works out to 11%. So when I show you the ring, the dragon gear, the base refines, the 660, so that's about an 11%. Still not bad. But, you could easily, buffer yourself at especially if you're doing this for bosses. It'd be nice to try to get closer to that 20% maximum if you can. But, take what you want to spend. These are maximum refines that I got for the base refines, so I kept them for now. But you do want to focus your attack, because when you're killing a boss, that's the most important thing. You need to deal as much damage per troop as you can, and then add as many troops as you can. So that's why march size is very important, and that's why your attack value is very, very important. So refining your spear and your ring is going to be really important for bosses. The second most important thing for both PvP and for bosses is your HP. You see, I got lucky, and I got some nice refines on these ones. But this one's still going to be very expensive for me to get rid of that Siege Machine HP and try to get. It's going to cost me 6,000 gems every time I hit that refine button and hope to get lucky. And that's just a roll of the dice. But the HP is very good because it significantly lowers the amount of damage that I take, which is helpful when you're running some of the bigger bosses for your alliance. Ideally, you want to run bosses that you go 0 on, but sometimes there's too much value, like the extra scrolls that we're getting. So that's worth it to get that. So that's where HP comes in. When it comes down to your PvP, HP is king. It is so important when it comes to both defense and offense for Cavs, because they're out in front and they're getting dirty. They're very strong and powerful troops, but they get into all the action. They're going to run into the other Cavs. They get to swing first at them. They're going to run into the ground troops. They're going to run into the archers, and they're going to and eventually get hit by siege. So having high percentage HP on your Cavs is very important. And then finally, you have your defense, which, again, defense will come into play in PvP. The most talked about one, and this is the most difficult one, is going to be your wall general. I know we're getting a little longer. We're getting a little over 10 minutes here, but I think it's worth it to talk about some of these strategies. And keep in mind that these strategies, it's open for your interpretation to how you want to play the game. So there's a perfect strategy overall, like to get all 25% on these, but how much is it going to cost? How long is it going to take? And how many generals can you do that for? You can't do it for everything in this game. But when you're talking about your wall general, it's definitely very important. The two most important stats in the game, and that most like top level players are going to look at, is the quality of your archer attack and siege attack. That's what's going to deal most of the damage for you. So when you're refining your I hate this. You can't bring it up sometimes. When you're refining your bow, you typically want to try to get your range troop and siege troop. And then same thing with your ring. Again, if you're going to take a really high one, if you come across a 25%er, take it. Why not? Unless you really have a specific strategy. Defense is going to come down to that. And at the end of the day, with a wall general, the cool thing is you can very easily just switch gear. You can go in and switch that helmet out and change your gear, or even switch the entire wall gen. So maybe you get scouted and you're thinking and you're building up a plan of how you're going to rally or attack a certain player. But in the meantime, you've just got scouted as having high cav HP or lots of calves. But maybe then right after that, you hide your calves and you put your siege or your ground HP guy up that buffs your calves. So you get archer rallied, but all your calves are hidden and your stats aren't on your calves anymore. These are just strategies you can think about and how you're going to play the game. But again, it's how much money you're going to spend. But as a rule of thumb, and because I don't spend much money on the game, I'm not going to be able to build multiple pieces, but I'm going to try to switch them around possibly between and multi-use them between my different generals. But what I do want on my wall is going to generally be for HP, either cav HP, very, very important, or ground HP. Ground HP is very important because on defense, archers are so strong because they can go in and get massive value off of killing the calves because they counter them, and the calves go way out in front. So most top players will actually hide their calves to let the rest of the defense do work. But then, of course, that opens you up to a potential cav bomb if your archer stats aren't high enough. So you really want to make sure that you build your archer stats up enough so that you're not vulnerable to a cav bomb. When you're talking about defense, wow, this is crazy. You can click on these pieces, but sometimes they don't show. Does anyone else have that problem? The defense, you typically want to try to go with ground defense. Again, siege defense and archer defense really just doesn't do that much. Mounted defense could help, but it, again, depends on how you play and what type of keep and what types of attacks you're trying to bait. So that comes down to your strategy of how you interpret the game, how you see your opponents, and what little mind games you play to get them to attack you with the best thing that you can get points off of, because that's really what this is all about, is getting points for your troops. But really, in general, you're going to want to refine your helmet and your legs to be mostly ground HP, but probably cav. If I would take a higher one personally, I would take a higher one over, getting all ground that are lower. Like, so if you get a 25% cav HP, I'm not going to pass that up. With defense, you're probably going to want to lean towards ground, because ground defense is a really, really good stat. On ground defense is where it really kind of takes over, is what most people say. So we've talked a bit of strategy here. I hope I've covered everything that I wanted to, but hopefully this opens up to some of the strategies when you're thinking about how to build your generals. There's no right answer. Play it the way you want to play it, but those are my thoughts on how to get the most for your money and get the most points out of your game.